The desert sun blazed mercilessly over Bagram Air Base in eastern Afghanistan, casting shimmering heat waves across the concrete runway, where a formation of A-10 Thunderbolt II aircraft sat like sleeping metal predators. Their distinctive twin engines and massive GAU-8 cannons gave them an appearance both menacing and ungainly, earning them the affectionate nickname Warthogs among the pilots who flew them into combat zones across the Middle East. This particular squadron, the 354th Fighter Squadron Bulldogs, had been stationed at Bagram for 8 months, providing close air support for ground operations throughout the volatile Kunar province. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Captain Elena Rodriguez stepped out of the operations building and paused momentarily to survey the flight line, her dark eyes scanning the aircraft with the practiced assessment of someone who had learned to read danger in every detail. At 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighing barely 115 pounds, she looked more like a college student than a combat pilot capable of handling one of the military's most formidable ground attack aircraft. Her flight suit, despite being the smallest size available, still hung loose on her petite frame, secured with rolled sleeves and a cinched belt that emphasized rather than disguised her diminutive stature. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Around her, the other pilots of the 354th moved with the confident swagger typical of fighter jocks, their physical presence commanding attention even in relaxed conversation. Captain Jake Sullivan, the squadron's unofficial leader and a former college linebacker, stood near the briefing tent discussing mission parameters with Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson, their commanding officer. Both men towered over 6 feet, their broad shoulders filling out their flight suits in a way that suggested natural authority and physical dominance. Elena's journey to this moment had been anything but conventional. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood in El Paso, Texas, she had been the daughter of a single mother who worked double shifts at a medical supply warehouse to make ends meet. Her fascination with aviation began during elementary school visits to nearby Fort Bliss, where she would watch helicopters and transport planes with an intensity that worried her teachers. While other children played with dolls or video games, Elena spent hours building model aircraft and studying aerodynamics. Textbooks borrowed from the public library got her academic excellence had earned her a full scholarship to the Air Force Academy, where her small stature immediately made her a target for both subtle discrimination and outright harassment. The physical requirements for pilot training seemed designed to exclude someone of her dimensions. The ejection seat systems in most military aircraft were calibrated for pilots weighing at least 135 pounds, a standard she failed to meet by 20 pounds. The reach requirements for various cockpit controls assumed a minimum arm span that she barely satisfied even with her fingertips fully extended. Despite these challenges, Elena had demonstrated an almost supernatural aptitude for flight. Her small size, initially seen as a liability, became an advantage in the cramped cockpits of training aircraft. Her diminutive frame required less oxygen, generated less heat, and created minimal interference with the aircraft's center of gravity. Calculations. More importantly, her spatial reasoning abilities and hand-eye coordination consistently scored in the 99th percentile of all tested pilots. The A-10 Thunderbolt II had been her first choice for aircraft assignment, a decision that surprised her instructors and amused her fellow pilots. The A-10 was considered a brute force aircraft, designed for pilots who could muscle it through low-altitude combat environments while absorbing tremendous physical punishment from enemy fire and turbulence. Its titanium armor plating could withstand direct hits from small arms fire, but the trade-off was an aircraft that demanded significant physical strength to control during high-stress combat maneuvers. Elena's selection committee had initially rejected her application for A-10 training, citing concerns about her ability to handle the aircraft's demanding flight characteristics. Only the intervention of Colonel Sarah Mitchell, one of the few senior female officers in Air Combat Command, had secured Elena a spot in the training program. Mitchell had argued that pilot skill was more important than physical intimidation, and that the Air Force needed to evaluate pilots based on performance rather than appearance. The training itself had been a revelation. Where other pilots struggled with the A-10's unique handling characteristics, Elena seemed to develop an intuitive understanding of the aircraft's temperament. Her small hands could reach controls that challenged larger pilots, and her low body weight allowed for more precise weight distribution during complex maneuvers. Most significantly, her natural empathy and protective instincts aligned perfectly with the A-10's primary mission, providing close air support for ground troops in desperate situations. Now, after 18 months of operational flying, Elena had accumulated over 200 combat hours and participated in dozens of close air support missions throughout Afghanistan. Her logbook recorded successful strikes against Taliban positions, convoy escorts through hostile territory, and emergency medical evacuations conducted under enemy fire. Despite this extensive combat experience, she remained an outsider within her squadron, tolerated rather than embraced by her fellow pilots. The morning briefing tent buzzed with conversation as pilots reviewed intelligence reports and weather conditions for the day's missions. Elena took her usual seat at the back of the group, a position that allowed her to observe without drawing attention to herself. The squadron's mission board displayed 12 different sorties scheduled for the day, ranging from routine patrol flights to complex multi-aircraft operations supporting special forces units operating in the mountainous border regions. Captain Sullivan dominated the conversation, his voice carrying the casual confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. His aircraft, callsign Bulldog 6, had been modified with custom nose art depicting a snarling bulldog wearing pilot's wings. Sullivan's combat record was impressive by any standard, with over 300 combat hours and a distinguished flying cross, earned during a particularly intense engagement near Kandahar the previous year. Lieutenant Brad Kozłowski, Sullivan's wingman and frequent partner in both flying and harassment, leaned back in his chair with deliberate casualness. His pale complexion and red hair made him easily recognizable even from a distance, and his tendency toward cruel humor had earned him a reputation as the squadron's unofficial comedian. Kozłowski's aircraft bore the call sign Bulldog 7 and featured nose art depicting a cartoon character dropping bombs with an exaggerated grin. The dynamic between these pilots and Elena was complex, rooted in military tradition, gender politics, and the peculiar culture of combat aviation. Fighter pilots, regardless of their specific aircraft, maintained a mythology built around physical dominance, aggressive personality, and what military psychologists euphemistically called warrior mentality. Elena's presence challenged these assumptions in ways that made some of her colleagues deeply uncomfortable. Major Patricia Davis, the squadron's operations officer, entered the briefing tent carrying a stack of mission folders and a tablet displaying real-time intelligence updates. Davis was a veteran pilot herself, having flown A-10s during the initial invasion of Iraq before transitioning to staff duties. Her relationship with Elena was professionally respectful but carefully distant, reflecting the complex dynamics facing women in combat roles, who had to balance solidarity with their female colleagues against the need to maintain credibility with their male counterparts. Elena's call sign, Bulldog 9, had been assigned without ceremony or explanation, simply the next available number in the squadron's roster. Unlike Sullivan and Kozłowski, she had never commissioned custom nose art for her aircraft, preferring to maintain the standard Air Force gray paint scheme. This decision was partly practical, since nose art required approval from multiple levels of command but also reflected her philosophy that aircraft should be tools rather than expressions of personal ego. The briefing began with Lieutenant Colonel Thompson reviewing the overnight intelligence reports. Taliban activity had increased significantly in the Kunar province over the past week, with multiple roadside bomb attacks targeting coalition supply convoys. Reconnaissance satellites had identified several suspicious vehicle movements in areas known to harbor insurgent training camps. Most concerning were reports from Army Special Forces units operating near the Pakistani border who had observed large groups of fighters moving toward population centers where coalition forces maintained a minimal presence. Elena listened with focused attention, mentally calculating flight times, fuel requirements, and weapons loads for various contingencies. Her notebook filled with precise handwriting as she recorded grid coordinates, radio frequencies, and emergency procedures specific to each potential mission area. While other pilots relied on electronic devices and pre-programmed systems, Elena preferred handwritten notes that would remain accessible even if aircraft systems failed during combat. The morning's mission assignments were announced with typical military efficiency. Sullivan and Kozłowski received a high-profile escort mission for a convoy transporting senior Afghan government officials through a known hostile area. The mission would require close coordination with ground units and carried significant political implications if anything went wrong. 2 other pilot teams were assigned to patrol flights over major highways where improvised explosive devices had been discovered in recent weeks. Elena's assignment was characteristically different: a solo training flight to practice low altitude navigation and weapons delivery procedures over an uninhabited section of desert southeast of Bagram. The mission was officially described as proficiency training, but everyone understood it as busy work designed to keep her occupied, while more important operations were conducted by the squadron's male pilots. The training area was safe, predictable, and unlikely to produce any situations requiring split-second decision-making or aggressive maneuvering. As pilots dispersed to begin their pre-flight preparations, Elena overheard fragments of conversation that had become depressingly familiar. Over her months with the squadron, Sullivan's voice carried clearly across the tent as he discussed the convoy escort mission with his wingmen, making casual references to real combat flying and missions that matter. Kozłowski's response included a joke about training flights being appropriate for pilots who needed practice with basic flying skills. Elena gathered her equipment without acknowledging these comments, having learned that any response would only escalate the situation and potentially affect her professional standing within the squadron. Her gear bag contained the same essential items carried by every combat pilot: survival radio, emergency beacon, first aid kit, maps, and personal weapon. Additionally, she carried a small digital camera that she used to document interesting geological formations or wildlife encounters during solo flights, a hobby that provided some relief from the stress of military life. The walk to her aircraft took Elena past the maintenance hangar where technical sergeants worked on various A-10s requiring repairs or routine inspections. Staff Sergeant Michael Chun, her regular crew chief, was already conducting the pre-flight inspection of her aircraft with characteristic thoroughness. Chun was a 12-year Air Force veteran whose expertise with A-10 systems was legendary throughout the squadron. His relationship with Elena was purely professional, but notably warmer than her interactions with most of the squadron's pilots. Elena's A-10, tail number 7806-51, was a veteran aircraft that had seen combat in multiple theaters over its decades of service. The twin turbofan engines showed the wear patterns typical of aircraft that had accumulated thousands of flight hours in harsh desert environments. Every panel, rivet, and component told a story of missions flown, battles survived, and pilots brought safely home. Despite its age and accumulated wear, the aircraft had been meticulously maintained by Chun's team, and performed with the reliability that made the A-10 famous among ground forces worldwide. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The pre-flight inspection routine was sacred among combat pilots, a careful examination of every system that might determine the difference between life and death during flight operations. Elena's inspection was notably thorough, reflecting both her natural attention to detail and her awareness that any mechanical failure would be blamed on pilot error rather than maintenance issues. She checked fluid levels, control surface movement, weapon system status, and communication equipment with methodical precision. Chun briefed her on the aircraft status while they completed the inspection together. The previous day's flight had been routine, with no mechanical discrepancies noted in the maintenance logs. All weapon systems were operational, though the aircraft was configured with training ordnance rather than live ammunition for the day's proficiency flight. Fuel load was standard for the planned mission duration, with sufficient reserves for extended maneuvering practice and a comfortable safety margin for unexpected developments. As Elena completed her pre-flight procedures, the distinctive sound of A-10 engine spooling up echoed across the flight line as other aircraft prepared for departure. The twin General Electric TF-34 engines produced a characteristic whine that was instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with military aviation. Sullivan and Kozłowski's aircraft were among the first to taxi toward the runway, their movements coordinated with the precision expected of experienced combat pilots. Elena strapped herself into the cockpit with movements that had become automatic after hundreds of flights. The A-10's cockpit was cramped by fighter aircraft standards, but felt comfortable to someone of her dimensions. Every switch, display, and control was positioned within easy reach, and the aircraft systems responded to her inputs with the predictable precision she had learned to trust completely. The heads-up display showed aircraft status information in bright green characters, confirming that all systems were functioning normally. Radio communications crackled with the routine exchanges between pilots, air traffic control, and ground personnel as the morning's missions began. Elena listened to the familiar cadence of military radio procedure while completing her own engine start sequence. The twin turbofans wound up smoothly, their vibration transmitted through the aircraft structure and patterns she had learned to interpret as indicators of engine health and performance. Ground control cleared her for taxi to the runway, and Elena began the slow journey across the airfield toward the departure end. The A-10's tricycle landing gear provided a stable platform for ground operations, though the aircraft's low-slung profile meant that larger obstacles could be difficult to see from the cockpit. Elena navigated carefully around parked vehicles, maintenance equipment, and personnel moving about their duties on the busy military airfield. As she reached the runway's end and began her final checks before takeoff, Elena could see Sullivan and Kozłowski's aircraft already airborne and climbing toward their mission area. The sight triggered a familiar mixture of frustration and determination that had become her constant companion during her time with the squadron. She knew her skills were equal to any pilot in the unit, but she also understood that proving herself would require more than just competent flying. In a culture that valued tradition and conformity, her very presence challenged assumptions that some of her colleagues were not ready to abandon. The tower cleared her for takeoff, and Elena advanced the throttles smoothly forward. The twin engines responded with increasing power, pushing the heavily loaded aircraft down the runway with steadily building momentum. The A-10's takeoff roll was longer than most fighters due to its heavy weight and relatively low thrust-to-weight ratio, but Elena had learned to use this characteristic to her advantage, allowing more time to assess aircraft performance and abort the takeoff if necessary. As the aircraft lifted off the runway and climbed into the clear Afghan sky, Elena felt the familiar sense of freedom that came with flight. Up here, away from the social dynamics and professional politics of squadron life. She could focus purely on the mechanical relationship between pilot and machine. The A-10 responded to her inputs with honest directness, rewarding skill and punishing carelessness without regard for the pilot's gender, size, or social standing within the military hierarchy. Her assigned training area lay 40 minutes flying. Time to the southeast, over terrain that varied from flat desert to rolling hills dotted with occasional villages. The flight would provide opportunities to practice low-altitude navigation, simulated weapons delivery, and emergency procedures in an environment where mistakes would not endanger friendly forces or civilian populations. For Elena, it was also a chance to continue developing the intimate understanding of her aircraft that would prove crucial when training flights gave way to actual combat operations. The morning sun climbed higher as Elena's A-10 disappeared into the vast expanse of the Afghan sky, carrying with it a pilot whose determination to prove herself would soon be tested in ways no training flight could simulate. The emergency klaxon shattered the relative calm of Bagram Air Base at 13:47 hours, its piercing wail cutting through the ambient noise of aircraft engines and ground equipment like a knife through silence. Within seconds, the controlled chaos of a military installation shifted into the urgent precision of a combat response. Personnel across the base dropped their routine tasks and moved with the practiced efficiency that came from months of training and real-world experience in one of the world's most dangerous operational environments. In the operations center, a massive digital display board flickered to life with incoming intelligence reports, satellite imagery, and real-time communications from units across eastern Afghanistan. Major Patricia Davis stood before a bank of monitors, her expression grim as she coordinated with intelligence analysts, air traffic controllers, and ground force commanders whose voices crackled through secure radio channels with increasing urgency. The situation developing 40 miles northeast of Bagram represented every ground commander's worst nightmare. A routine supply convoy had been ambushed in the narrow Korangal Valley, a notorious choke point where Taliban forces had perfected the art of turning routine logistics operations into deadly killing fields. Convoy Delta 7, consisting of 18 heavily armored vehicles carrying critical medical supplies and ammunition to forward operating base Restrepo, had been struck by a coordinated attack that demonstrated both sophisticated planning and intimate knowledge of coalition movement patterns. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson burst through the operations center doors, still pulling on his flight gear after being summoned from a meeting with visiting Pentagon officials. His normally composed demeanor showed cracks of stress as he absorbed the incoming reports displayed across multiple screens. The convoy's lead vehicle had been destroyed by a massive improvised explosive device buried beneath the valley's only passable road. Within minutes, small arms fire and rocket-propelled grenades had begun raining down from concealed positions in the surrounding ridgelines. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Convoy Delta 7 Security Detachment, composed of soldiers from the 173rd Airborne Brigade, had immediately established defensive positions and called for close air support. However, their location in the narrow valley limited their ability to maneuver, while the attackers enjoyed the advantages of elevated terrain, prepared positions, and detailed knowledge of every rock and cave in the surrounding mountains. Major Davis coordinated frantically with the Joint Operations Center, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation developing in real time. Intelligence estimates suggested the attacking force numbered at least 60 fighters, significantly outnumbering the convoy's 28-person security detachment. Worse, intercepted radio communications indicated that additional Taliban reinforcements were moving toward the ambush site from multiple directions, potentially transforming a harassment attack into a coordinated attempt to overrun the convoy. Entirely, the convoy commander, Captain David Morrison of the 173rd Airborne, painted an increasingly desperate picture through his radio reports. 3 soldiers had been wounded in the initial blast, including his medic, and ammunition was running dangerously low after 30 minutes of continuous combat. The convoy's vehicles, while heavily armored, were trapped in a narrow section of road with steep embankments on both sides. Forward movement was blocked by the destroyed lead vehicle, while retreat was impossible due to additional IEDs that had been detonated behind them after the ambush began. Captain Morrison's voice, transmitted through layers of encryption and satellite relays, carried the controlled tension of a professional soldier facing impossible odds. His unit had trained extensively for convoy operations in hostile territory, but the reality of combat in Afghanistan's mountainous terrain presented challenges that no amount of training could fully simulate. The enemy fighters knew every ridge, cave, and escape route, while Morrison's soldiers were confined to a narrow strip of road with limited cover and no opportunity for flanking maneuvers. The immediate challenge facing the operations center was the shortage of available close air support assets. Sullivan and Kozłowski's aircraft were committed to their convoy escort mission in another province, while 2 other A-10 teams were conducting time-sensitive strikes against high-value targets near the Pakistani border. The base's Apache helicopter gunships were grounded for emergency maintenance after discovering stress fractures in their main rotor assemblies. The nearest fighter aircraft capable of providing close air support were F-16s, operating from Kandahar, but their response time would exceed 45 minutes, even at maximum speed. Major Davis studied the digital map displaying the ambush site with growing concern. The Karingal Valley's terrain was notorious among military planners for its complexity and the advantages it provided to defending forces. Steep ridgelines rose sharply on both sides of the valley floor, creating natural firing positions that were nearly impossible to assault directly. Cave systems throughout the area provided sheltered positions for fighters and weapons, while the narrow valley floor funneled attacking aircraft into predictable flight paths that exposed them to concentrated ground fire. Previous operations in the Karengal had resulted in significant aircraft losses, including 2 Apache helicopters shot down by rocket-propelled grenades and an F-16 that had crashed after being hit by heavy machine gun fire. The valley had earned the grim nickname Valley of Death among coalition forces, a reputation that influenced tactical planning for any operation in the area. Standard procedure called for multiple aircraft working in coordination with extensive intelligence preparation and careful route planning to minimize exposure to ground fire. The tactical complexity was compounded by the presence of civilian villages scattered throughout the valley. Rules of engagement strictly prohibited attacks on structures that might contain non-combatants, while Taliban fighters had become expert at positioning themselves near schools, mosques, and residential compounds. Previous close air support missions in similar terrain had been criticized by both military investigators and international media when civilian casualties resulted from weapon strikes that had seemed clearly justified to the pilots involved. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson reviewed the available options with growing frustration. Standard military doctrine called for overwhelming force when conducting close air support in such challenging terrain. The preferred response would involve at least 4 attack aircraft working in coordination, supported by intelligence-gathering drones and electronic warfare platforms to jam enemy communications. Instead, he faced the prospect of sending a single pilot into one of the most dangerous operational environments in Afghanistan. The time factor added another layer of urgency to an already desperate situation. Captain Morrison's radio reports indicated that his ammunition supply would be exhausted within 20 minutes, while enemy fire was intensifying as additional fighters reached the ambush site. Medical supplies in the convoy included blood products and critical medications needed by wounded soldiers at Forward Operating Base Restrepo, making the loss of the convoy a potential disaster that would extend far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Major Davis coordinated with intelligence analysts to develop the most current assessment of enemy positions and capabilities. Drone footage revealed muzzle flashes from at least 12 separate firing positions, scattered across the ridgelines overlooking the convoy's position. The attackers had clearly planned their ambush carefully, positioning heavy weapons to cover all possible escape routes, while maintaining concealed positions that would be difficult for aircraft to locate and engage. The radio crackled with Captain Morrison's increasingly urgent updates. Enemy fighters were attempting to advance down the eastern ridgeline toward positions that would allow them to attack the convoy with grenades and automatic weapons at close range. His soldiers had established a defensive perimeter, but their position was deteriorating rapidly as ammunition ran low and wounded personnel required attention that his remaining medics could not provide while under continuous fire. The tactical situation demanded immediate close air support, but the available aircraft presented limited options. Elena's A-10 was the only immediately available platform, but her current position over the southeastern training area placed her nearly 30 minutes flying time from the ambush site. More critically, she was configured with training ordnance rather than the live weapons needed for a combat mission. Standard procedure would require her to return to Bagram, reconfigure with combat ordnance, receive a detailed mission briefing, and coordinate with ground controllers before proceeding to the target area. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson faced a decision that would define his command and potentially determine the fate of 28 soldiers trapped in the Korengal Valley. Military regulations clearly outlined the procedures for close air support. Missions emphasizing detailed planning, coordination, and overwhelming force. However, the rapidly deteriorating situation on the ground was developing faster than standard procedures could accommodate. By the time Elena could return to base, reconfigure her aircraft, and receive proper briefing, Captain Morrison's unit might be overrun. The intelligence picture continued to develop as additional reports filtered through the operations center. Signals intelligence had intercepted Taliban radio communications indicating that the ambush was part of a larger operation designed to capture American prisoners and seize the convoy's medical supplies for propaganda purposes. The attackers had prepared extensively, positioning additional forces to block potential rescue attempts and establishing escape routes that would allow them to disappear into the mountainous terrain if the situation turned against them. Major Davis coordinated with the base armorer to explore alternative options for providing Elena with combat ordnance while she remained airborne. The process was technically possible, but would require her to land at a forward airstrip closer to the combat zone, where maintenance personnel could reconfigure her weapons load under field conditions. However, this approach would still require significant time and would place additional personnel at risk while operating in an unsecured location. The tactical radio network buzzed with increasingly desperate communications from the ambush site. Captain Morrison reported that enemy fighters had succeeded in flanking his eastern perimeter and were now within grenade range of his defensive positions. 2 additional soldiers had been wounded, including his senior sergeant, leaving the unit with limited leadership and depleted capability to maintain coordinated defensive fire. The convoy's vehicles, while providing some protection from small arms fire, were being systematically targeted by rocket-propelled grenades that could penetrate their armor at close range. Elena's voice crackled through the radio as she checked in with air traffic control during her routine training flight, unaware of the crisis developing 40 miles to the northeast. Her transmission, calm and professional, reported her position and requested clearance to begin weapons delivery practice using the inert training ordnance loaded on her aircraft. The contrast between her routine training mission and the life and death struggle in the Korengal Valley highlighted the arbitrary nature of military assignments and the thin line between routine operations and combat emergencies. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson reviewed the tactical situation one final time, weighing the risks of sending a single pilot into an extremely dangerous environment, against the certainty that Captain Morrison's unit would be overrun without immediate support. The decision violated standard operating procedures and placed Elena in a situation that no single pilot should face alone. However, the alternative was accepting the loss of an entire convoy and the potential capture of American personnel by enemy forces. The intelligence reports painted an increasingly grim picture of enemy capabilities and intentions. Radio intercepts revealed that Taliban commanders viewed the ambush as an opportunity to inflict significant casualties on coalition forces while capturing valuable prisoners and equipment. The attackers had prepared extensively, positioning anti-aircraft weapons throughout the valley to engage any rescue attempts. Elena would be flying into a carefully prepared kill zone, where enemy fighters had every advantage except time. Major Davis completed her coordination with ground forces, establishing communication protocols and target identification procedures that would allow Elena to engage enemy positions while minimizing the risk of friendly fire incidents. The process was complicated by the confused tactical situation on the ground, where enemy and friendly positions were separated by distances measured in meters, rather than the kilometers that typically defined close air support operations. Medical situation added another dimension of urgency to the developing crisis. The convoy's wounded personnel required immediate evacuation to facilities capable of providing advanced trauma care. However, medical helicopters could not approach the ambush site while it remained under enemy fire, creating a cascading series of tactical problems that could only be resolved through immediate and overwhelming application of air power against the attacking forces. Captain Morrison's latest radio transmission carried the unmistakable sound of nearby explosions and automatic weapons fire. His voice, strained but professional, reported that enemy fighters had advanced to within 50 meters of his command vehicle and were attempting to overwhelm his defensive positions through concentrated assault. The situation had reached the critical point where minutes would determine whether the convoy could be saved or would be lost along with all personnel and equipment. The weight of command settled heavily on Lieutenant Colonel Thompson's shoulders as he prepared to make a decision that would echo through the remainder of his military career. The choice was between following established procedures that might result in the loss of an entire unit, or improvising a desperate rescue attempt that placed a single pilot against overwhelming odds in one of the most dangerous environments. In the theater of operations, the radio crackled with Elena's calm voice as she continued her training flight. Unaware that her routine day was about to transform into the most challenging mission of her military career, the secure radio transmission reached Elena's aircraft at 14:05 hours, crackling through her headset with the unmistakable urgency of a priority military communication. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson's voice, transmitted through multiple encryption layers and satellite relays, carried a gravity that immediately commanded her attention despite the routine nature of her training. Mission. The formal call sign protocols that began the transmission indicated this was not a standard training update or weather advisory. Bulldog 9. This is Bulldog Base. Terminate current exercise and proceed immediately to grid coordinates November 7426. For priority close air support mission. Time critical. Acknowledge. Elena's response was immediate and professional, though her mind raced to process the sudden shift from routine training to active combat operations. Her fingers moved automatically across the cockpit switches, canceling her current navigation program and inputting the new coordinates while maintaining stable flight. The grid reference placed the target area in the notorious Korangal Valley, a location that appeared frequently in intelligence briefings as one of the most dangerous operational environments in Afghanistan. Bulldog Base, Bulldog 9 acknowledges. Proceeding to November 7-4-2-6-8. Request mission brief and current tactical situation. The response from Lieutenant Colonel Thompson carried information that fundamentally altered Elena's understanding of her role in the day's operations. Convoy Delta 7 had been ambushed and was facing annihilation, unless immediate close air support could suppress the attacking force. More critically, Elena's aircraft was the only available platform capable of reaching the combat zone in time to prevent the convoy's destruction. The mission parameters violated every principle of careful planning and overwhelming force that governed close air support doctrine. Back at Bagram Air Base, the operations center buzzed with activity as personnel coordinated the unprecedented decision to deploy a single aircraft against a complex enemy force in challenging terrain. Major Davis worked frantically to establish communication links between Elena's aircraft, the trapped convoy, and supporting intelligence platforms. The improvised nature of the mission meant that standard protocols were being adapted in real time, creating potential for confusion and miscommunication that could prove fatal in a combat environment. Captain Sullivan and Lieutenant Kozłowski's voices erupted over the squadron's internal communication channel as news of Elena's combat assignment reached their aircraft. Their ongoing convoy escort mission, while important, paled in comparison to the life-and-death struggle developing in the Korengal Valley. Sullivan's initial reaction combined professional jealousy with genuine concern about Elena's capability to handle such a demanding mission independently. "Base, this is Bulldog 6. Sullivan's transmission carried barely controlled frustration. "Recommend we abort the current mission and proceed to support Bulldog 9. This is a 2-aircraft minimum situation, not appropriate for solo operations." Lieutenant Colonel Thompson's response was immediate and final. "Negative, Bulldog 6. Your current mission remains a priority. Bulldog 9 is cleared for independent close air support operations." Kozłowski's voice followed on a discreet channel, his tone mixing disbelief with his characteristic cruel humor. "Are they seriously sending Rodriguez into the Valley of Death by herself? She can barely handle routine training flights without making mistakes." The comment, while transmitted on what Kozłowski believed was a private frequency, was inadvertently BROADCST across the squadron's tactical network. Elena heard every word clearly, along with Sullivan's subsequent agreement and additional disparaging observations about her suitability for combat operations. The psychological impact was immediate and deliberate, designed to undermine her confidence at the moment when she most needed unwavering self-assurance. Sullivan's commentary continued with the casual cruelty that had become his trademark when discussing Elena's capabilities. "Control should have waited for real pilots to become available. This mission requires someone who can handle combat stress and make split-second decisions under fire. Not exactly Rodriguez's strong suits." The implicit suggestion that Elena lacked the fundamental qualities necessary for combat flying struck at the core of every insecurity she had faced throughout her military career. Her small physical stature had been consistently interpreted as indicating weakness, indecision, and inability to handle the aggressive nature of combat operations. The fact that these criticisms were being voiced during her first major combat mission magnified their psychological impact exponentially. Lieutenant Kozłowski's voice added another layer of mockery to the ongoing character assassination. "Maybe they figure if she gets shot down, it's no great loss to the squadron's capability. Better to risk the weak link than compromise our real combat effectiveness with Sullivan and me tied up in support roles." Elena's hands tightened involuntarily on the aircraft's controls as she absorbed the casual dismissal of her value as both a pilot and a human being. The comments revealed the depth of resentment and discrimination she faced within her own squadron, attitudes that had been carefully concealed behind professional courtesy during face-to-face interactions but emerged clearly when her colleagues believed she could not hear their true opinions. Major Davis, monitoring the tactical communications from the operations center, recognized the psychological warfare being conducted against Elena at the worst possible moment. Her own position as one of the few senior women in the squadron created a complex dynamic where intervention might be interpreted as favoritism or weakness, while inaction allowed the harassment to continue during a critical mission. All stations maintain communication discipline and focus on assigned missions. Davis transmitted with professional authority, though her words carried insufficient force to completely silence the ongoing commentary. The stream of disparaging observations continued as Elena flew toward the combat zone, each comment carefully crafted to maximize psychological damage while maintaining plausible deniability as professional concern. Sullivan's voice dominated the channel with observations about Elena's supposed limitations in high-stress situations, her lack of aggressive instincts, and her tendency toward overthinking rather than decisive action. Rodriguez has always been more of a technician than a warrior, Sullivan observed with the authority of someone discussing established fact rather than personal opinion. She might know the aircraft systems inside and out, but combat flying requires killer instinct and physical aggression. You can't teach someone to be a predator. Kozłowski's agreement came with additional commentary about Elena's training performance and supposed deficiencies in simulated combat exercises. His observations, while containing elements of truth twisted through the lens of prejudice, were designed to create doubt about her fundamental suitability for military aviation. The timing of these attacks during Elena's approach to her first major combat mission demonstrated a level of calculated cruelty that went beyond casual harassment. Remember her performance during Red Flag last year? Kozłowski continued, referencing the Air Force's premier combat training exercise. She flew like someone afraid of getting her hands dirty, always looking for the safe play instead of pressing the attack when opportunities presented themselves. The reference to Red Flag struck particularly deep because it contained enough truth to be credible while ignoring the context that had shaped Elena's performance. During that exercise, she had been assigned to a training scenario that emphasized careful target identification and collateral damage avoidance, priorities that required measured approaches rather than aggressive tactics. Her methodical performance had been praised by exercise evaluators, but was now being reinterpreted as evidence of timidity and combat inadequacy. Elena's voice remained steady as she requested additional tactical information from the operations center, though the strain of maintaining professional composure while enduring ongoing psychological attack was evident to anyone listening carefully. Her training had prepared her for enemy fire and mechanical failures, but nothing had prepared her for conducting her first major combat mission while her own squadron mates actively worked to undermine her confidence and capabilities. The tactical situation developing around the ambushed convoy added another layer of complexity to Elena's psychological challenge. Radio communications from Captain Morrison painted an increasingly desperate picture of ammunition running low, casualties mounting, and enemy forces closing in for what appeared to be a final assault. The weight of 28 lives hanging in the balance amplified every doubt and criticism being directed at her abilities. Sullivan's voice returned to the tactical frequency with what he presented as helpful guidance, but was clearly intended as additional psychological pressure. Rodriguez, remember that the Korengal is not a training environment. Enemy fighters there are experienced, well-equipped, and highly motivated. They've shot down multiple aircraft using tactics specifically designed to exploit pilot hesitation and indecision. The warning, while factually accurate, was delivered with timing and emphasis designed to increase rather than alleviate stress. Sullivan's tone carried the implication that Elena's supposed tendency toward overcaution would prove fatal when facing experienced enemy fighters who specialized in destroying aircraft, attempting close air support missions in challenging terrain. Kozłowski added his own contribution to the psychological warfare campaign with observations about aircraft losses in the Korengal Valley. The Taliban there know exactly how to funnel attacking aircraft into kill zones. They've studied our tactics and learned to exploit the mistakes that inexperienced pilots make under pressure. No room for error or second-guessing. Elena's response demonstrated the professional discipline that had carried her through years of discrimination and harassment. Rather than engaging with the personal attacks or defending her capabilities, she focused entirely on mission-essential communications with the operations center and the ground forces she was approaching to support. Bulldog Base, Bulldog 9. Requests current tactical situation and target identification procedures. Approaching the area of operations in 12 minutes. Major Davis coordinated the tactical briefing while simultaneously monitoring the ongoing psychological assault against Elena. The operations center's professional staff had heard every comment transmitted over the tactical networks, creating awareness throughout the base command structure of the dysfunctional dynamics within the 354th Fighter Squadron. However, the immediate priority remained the trapped convoy, leaving personnel issues to be addressed after the crisis resolution. The intelligence briefing painted a tactical picture that would challenge even the most experienced close air support pilot. Enemy forces occupied prepared positions throughout the valley's ridgelines, with anti-aircraft weapons positioned to engage attacking aircraft from multiple directions simultaneously. The narrow valley geography funneled attacking aircraft into predictable flight paths, while providing defenders with numerous escape routes and concealed firing positions. Captain Morrison's increasingly desperate radio transmissions provided real-time updates on the deteriorating tactical situation around the convoy. Enemy fighters had succeeded in reaching positions within hand grenade range of the defensive perimeter, while ammunition supplies had fallen to critically low levels. The convoy's wounded personnel required immediate medical evacuation, but helicopter rescue was impossible while the area remained under effective enemy fire. Elena absorbed this information while continuing to endure the ongoing commentary from her squadron mates, who seemed determined to maximize her psychological stress at the moment when clear thinking and decisive action were most critical. Their behavior revealed the depth of institutional prejudice within military aviation culture, where women pilots faced not only external enemies but also sabotage from within their own units. Sullivan's voice carried a tone of false concern as he continued his psychological assault. Just remember, Rodriguez, there are no do-overs in combat. When you hesitate or second-guess yourself, people die. The convoy is counting on decisive action, not careful analysis of every possible option. The implicit accusation that Elena's methodical approach to problem-solving represented hesitation and indecision struck at fundamental aspects of her flying philosophy. Throughout her career, she had relied on thorough preparation and systematic analysis to compensate for any perceived deficiencies in natural aggression or physical intimidation. Now facing her first major combat mission, her own squadron was actively working to convince her that these strengths were actually fatal weaknesses. Kozłowski's final contribution to the harassment campaign carried the casual cruelty that had become his signature. Good luck, Rodriguez. Try not to let an entire convoy get wiped out because you were afraid to take risks. That would be a hard thing to live with. The comment, presented as encouragement, was actually a carefully constructed psychological trap designed to create paralysis through fear of making mistakes. By suggesting that aggressive action was the only acceptable approach while simultaneously questioning Elena's courage and judgment, Kozłowski and Sullivan created a situation where any decision she made could be criticized as either reckless or cowardly. Elena's response cut through the psychological noise with professional clarity that surprised even her harshest critics. Bulldog Base, Bulldog 9 approaching the initial point. Request immediate tactical control and target designation. Ready to engage. The transmission carried a level of focused determination that silenced the ongoing commentary and shifted attention to the developing combat situation. Elena had absorbed the worst psychological assault her own squadron could deliver, and emerged with her professional competence intact. Now, approaching the most dangerous operational environment in Afghanistan, she would have the opportunity to prove that skill and determination could overcome both enemy fire and friendly sabotage. Elena's A-10 Thunderbolt crested the final ridgeline, separating her from the Koringal Valley at 1418 hours, and the tactical situation below immediately challenged every assumption about proper close air support doctrine. The narrow valley stretched before her like a geographical trap, its steep walls rising sharply on both sides while the convoy's vehicle sat motionless on the valley floor, surrounded by the systematic destruction that marked an expertly planned ambush. Smoke columns rose from multiple points along the road, while muzzle flashes flickered from concealed positions scattered across the surrounding ridgelines. Like deadly stars in broad daylight, her first transmission to the ground forces demonstrated a level of tactical awareness that surprised Captain Morrison, who had been prepared for lengthy coordination procedures with an inexperienced pilot requiring extensive guidance. Instead, Elena's voice carried the calm professionalism of someone who had already analyzed the tactical situation and developed preliminary solutions before announcing her presence. Hillside 6, this is Bulldog 9 on station. I observe your position with enemy fire from multiple elevated locations. Request immediate designation of highest priority targets and safe direction for initial attack run. Captain Morrison's response reflected both relief at the arrival of air support and amazement at Elena's immediate grasp of the tactical complexity facing his unit. Most pilots required several minutes of coordination and explanation before understanding the three-dimensional nature of combat in mountainous terrain, where enemy positions were scattered across multiple elevation levels and concealed behind natural obstacles. Bulldog 9, Hillside 6, priority targets are heavy weapons positions on the eastern ridge, approximately 600 meters from my location. Enemy fighters are advancing down that ridge toward our perimeter. We have wounded personnel requiring immediate suppression of those positions. Elena's response demonstrated spatial reasoning abilities that allowed her to translate Captain Morrison's verbal description into precise tactical geometry without requiring additional clarification or confirmation. Her small stature, which had been consistently interpreted as a limitation throughout her military career, proved advantageous in the cramped confines of the A-10's cockpit as she maneuvered to study the tactical situation below. Hillside 6, I have visual contact with muzzle flashes from 3 separate positions on the eastern ridge. Confirm you want suppression fires on the northernmost position first, as enemy movement appears concentrated there. The accuracy of Elena's tactical assessment, delivered within seconds of arriving over the combat zone, represented a level of situational awareness that typically required extensive experience in similar environments. Captain Morrison had worked with numerous close air support pilots throughout his deployment, and most required significantly more time and guidance to achieve comparable understanding of ground tactical situations. Bulldog 9, that's exactly right. The northern position is an immediate priority, followed by the central location approximately 200 meters south. Be advised, we have friendly forces in covered positions along the western road embankment. Elena's acknowledgement carried details that revealed her ability to process complex tactical information, while simultaneously managing the demanding task of flying a heavily loaded aircraft in mountainous terrain under combat conditions. Her voice remained steady despite the obvious stress of the situation, suggesting reserves of composure that contradicted her squadron's assumptions about her suitability for high-pressure combat operations. Copy all, Hillside 6, I'm configured with training ordnance, not optimal for hard targets, but can provide accurate suppression fires. Initiating attack from the south. We'll keep all fires east of the road to maintain safe separation from your positions." The casual mention of her weapons configuration drew immediate attention from the operations center at Bagram Air Base, where Major Davis realized that Elena was attempting to conduct close air support with practice ammunition rather than live combat ordnance. The training rounds would provide limited effectiveness against hardened enemy positions, requiring exceptional accuracy and tactical creativity to achieve meaningful results. "Captain," Sullivan's voice erupted over the squadron's tactical frequency. With undisguised satisfaction at this apparent confirmation of Elena's inadequate preparation for combat operations. "Base, did Rodriguez just admit she's attacking an enemy force with training rounds? This is exactly what happens when you send unprepared pilots into combat situations." Lieutenant Kozłowski's response carried mock sympathy that barely concealed his pleasure at Elena's apparent tactical disadvantage. "Maybe she can ask the Taliban to wait while she returns to base for proper ammunition. This is going to be a disaster, and Morrison's people will pay the price for headquarters' poor decision-making." Elena ignored the commentary from her squadron mates, focusing entirely on the immediate tactical problem of suppressing enemy positions with limited ordnance, while operating alone in an environment designed to destroy attacking aircraft. Her approach to the problem demonstrated creative thinking and tactical flexibility that went far beyond what her critics expected from someone they characterized as a rule-following technician. The initial attack run began with Elena descending toward the valley floor at an angle that utilized the terrain to mask her approach until the final seconds before weapons release. Her flight path, invisible to ground observers until she emerged from behind a natural ridgeline, demonstrated intimate understanding of how terrain could be used to achieve tactical surprise even in broad daylight conditions. Captain Morrison watched through binoculars as Elena's A-10 appeared suddenly above the eastern ridge, its distinctive silhouette immediately recognizable to ground forces who had learned to associate the aircraft with effective close air support. However, Morrison had never seen an A-10 flown with the precision and tactical creativity that Elena demonstrated as she positioned her aircraft for weapons delivery. The training rounds, while lacking the explosive power of combat ordnance, were delivered with surgical accuracy that compensated for their limited destructive capability through precise placement. Elena's first burst struck directly into the cave entrance where the Taliban's heavy machine gun position had been firing down on the convoy. The impacts accurate enough to force the enemy fighters to abandon their prepared position and seek alternative cover. Hillside 6, Bulldog 9. First suppressed, enemy fighters observed evacuating the northern position. "Moving to engage the central target. Keep your heads down." Captain Morrison's response reflected amazement at the immediate effectiveness of Elena's attack despite her ammunition limitations. Bulldog 9, outstanding shooting. Northern position is definitely out of action, and we're seeing significant reduction in fire from the eastern ridge overall. The success of Elena's initial attack run had immediate tactical and psychological effects that extended far beyond the direct destruction of enemy positions. Taliban fighters throughout the valley had observed the precision and effectiveness of her weapons delivery, creating uncertainty about the true capabilities of the attacking aircraft and forcing them to reconsider their own tactical positions and planned movements. Elena's second attack run demonstrated even greater tactical sophistication as she adapted her approach to account for the enemy's reaction to her first attack. Instead of repeating her southern approach, she circled wide to the north before descending along the opposite ridge, achieving surprise against fighters who had repositioned to defend against attacks from her previous direction. The central machine gun position, located in a natural rock formation that provided excellent protection against conventional attack angles, required Elena to develop an innovative solution that utilized her aircraft's unique capabilities. Rather than attacking directly, She positioned her aircraft to deliver training rounds that ricocheted off the surrounding rock surfaces, creating multiple impact points that effectively neutralized the position without requiring direct hits. Hillside 6, central position is suppressed. Enemy fighters are withdrawing from that location and moving toward the southern end of the ridge. Recommend your people prepare for possible enemy movement toward the road from that direction. Captain. Morrison's tactical appreciation for Elena's performance continued to grow as he observed her ability to predict enemy behavior and provide advance warning of developing threats. Most close air support pilots focused exclusively on immediate target engagement, leaving ground commanders to anticipate enemy reactions and subsequent tactical developments independently. The operations center at Bagram monitored Elena's performance with growing amazement that was reflected in the sudden silence from Captain Sullivan and Lieutenant Kozłowski. Their earlier predictions of disaster and incompetence seemed increasingly disconnected from the tactical reality developing in the Kringle Valley, where Elena was systematically dismantling enemy positions despite her supposed limitations and inadequate equipment. Major Davis coordinated with intelligence analysts to assess the broader tactical situation as Elena's attacks began to shift the momentum of the engagement. Drone footage revealed that Taliban reinforcements approaching the ambush site had halted their advance and were seeking concealed positions, apparently reconsidering their participation in what had seemed like a certain victory over the trapped Convoy. Elena's third attack run targeted a mortar position that had been launching indirect fire against the convoy from a concealed location behind the western ridge. The position's location made it invisible to ground forces, but vulnerable to attack from aircraft approaching from specific angles. Elena's ability to locate and engage the position demonstrated tactical awareness that impressed even the most experienced personnel monitoring the engagement. Bulldog 9, how did you spot that mortar position? We've been taking indirect fire for 30 minutes, but couldn't identify the source location. Elena's response revealed analytical capabilities that went beyond simple visual observation to include understanding of ballistic trajectories and tactical geometry. Hillside 6, I tracked the projectile paths backward from your impact points and identified the most likely firing position based on terrain features. Mortar crews need relatively flat ground with good escape routes, which limits their location options in this terrain. The explanation demonstrated intellectual rigor and tactical sophistication that contradicted every assumption about Elena's capabilities that had been voiced by her squadron colleagues. Rather than relying on luck or basic flying skills, she was conducting systematic analysis of the tactical situation and developing comprehensive solutions that addressed both immediate threats and longer-term tactical considerations. Morrison's growing confidence in Elena's abilities led him to request support for increasingly complex tactical problems that would have challenged even experienced close air support teams. His requests reflected a fundamental shift in perception from viewing Elena as emergency assistance of questionable value to recognizing her as a tactical asset capable of sophisticated combat operations. Bulldog 9, we have wounded personnel who need medical evacuation, but the landing zone is still under observation by enemy forces on the southern ridge. Can you clear that area to allow helicopter approach? Elena's response demonstrated mission flexibility and creative problem-solving that transformed her weapons limitations into tactical advantages. Hillside 6, I can't destroy hard targets with training rounds, but I can definitely convince enemy observers to relocate. Give me the exact grid coordinates for your preferred landing zone, and I'll make that area very uncomfortable for anyone trying to maintain observation. The subsequent attack runs showcased Elena's growing confidence and tactical creativity as she adapted to the unique requirements of each target engagement. Her use of training ammunition, initially seen as a critical disadvantage, became a demonstration of pilot skill over technological superiority as she achieved meaningful Tactical results through precision and innovation rather than overwhelming. Firepower. Taliban radio communications, intercepted by intelligence platforms monitoring the engagement, revealed growing frustration and confusion among enemy commanders, who had expected to overwhelm the convoy before effective air support could arrive. Instead, they found themselves facing a pilot whose tactical unpredictability and accurate weapons delivery was systematically destroying their planned operations. Elena's performance began to draw attention from senior personnel throughout the operational theater as reports of her tactical creativity and effectiveness spread through military communication networks. The engagement was being monitored by Special Operations Command, Air Combat Command, and several Joint Task Force headquarters, whose personnel were amazed by the tactical results being achieved by a single pilot using training ammunition. Psychological impact of Elena's attacks extended beyond their immediate tactical effects to influence the broader strategic situation in the Korangal Valley. Taliban forces had invested significant resources in planning and executing the convoy ambush, expecting to achieve a propaganda victory that would demonstrate coalition vulnerability to sophisticated enemy tactics. Instead, the engagement was becoming a demonstration of American tactical flexibility and pilot expertise. Captain Morrison's latest situation report reflected the dramatic shift in tactical momentum that had resulted from Elena's intervention. Base, this is Hillside 6. Enemy pressure has decreased significantly, and we're observing withdrawal of hostile forces from multiple positions. Bulldog 9's attacks have been extremely effective despite ammunition limitations. The report prompted immediate questions from higher headquarters about Elena's tactical approach and the weapon systems being employed. Her ability to achieve meaningful tactical results with training ordnance challenged conventional wisdom about the relationship between weapons technology and combat effectiveness, suggesting that pilot skill remained the critical variable in close air support operations. Elena's calm professional demeanor throughout the engagement provided a stark contrast to the chaos and confusion that typically characterized close air support missions in challenging environments. Her communications remained clear and informative, providing ground forces with tactical intelligence while coordinating her own attack patterns to maximize effectiveness and minimize risk to friendly personnel. The first phase of the engagement had demonstrated capabilities that contradicted every negative assessment of Elena's potential as a combat pilot. Rather than proving her inadequacy for high-stress operations, the crisis had revealed reserves of tactical competence and professional composure that surprised even her most vocal critics. The real test, however, would come as the tactical situation continued to evolve and Elena faced even greater challenges that would determine whether her initial success represented temporary luck or genuine expertise. The tactical situation in the Korangal Valley transformed dramatically as Elena's initial successes triggered a cascade of enemy repositioning that revealed the full scope of the Taliban ambush force. What had appeared to be isolated firing positions scattered along the ridgelines was actually a sophisticated network of interconnected positions designed to channel attacking aircraft into predetermined kill zones. As enemy fighters abandoned their compromised locations, their movement patterns exposed the true complexity of the threat facing the trapped convoy. Elena's exceptional spatial awareness allowed her to recognize these movement patterns as they developed, providing her with tactical intelligence that conventional close air support doctrine had never anticipated. Her small frame, which had been the source of endless criticism throughout her career, proved advantageous in the tight confines of the A-10's cockpit as she twisted and maneuvered to track multiple groups of enemy fighters simultaneously while maintaining control of her aircraft in the challenging mountain environment. Hillside 6, Bulldog 9. I'm observing coordinated enemy movement toward 3 separate rally points. This wasn't a random ambush. They've got prepared positions throughout the entire valley system. You're dealing with a much larger force than initially estimated. Captain Morrison's response reflected growing recognition that Elena's analytical capabilities extended far beyond simple target identification to encompass comprehensive battlefield assessment. Her ability to synthesize scattered tactical observations into coherent intelligence assessments represented a level of combat awareness that typically required extensive experience in similar environments. Bulldog 9, that confirms what we've been suspecting. Can you identify their main supply route? If we can cut off their supply and escape paths, we might be able to turn this around completely. Elena's answer demonstrated tactical thinking that incorporated both immediate engagement requirements and longer-term strategic considerations. Rather than focusing exclusively on individual target destruction, she was developing an understanding of the enemy's operational architecture that could enable more effective countermeasures. Hillside 6. I'm tracking movement along a concealed trail system that runs parallel to the main valley about 800 meters to the east. Enemy fighters are using natural defilade to move between positions without exposure to ground observation. That trail connects to a larger network that probably extends beyond the immediate area. The intelligence revelation prompted immediate interest from the operations center at Bagram, where Major Davis coordinated with reconnaissance platforms to develop a comprehensive picture of the enemy's tactical infrastructure. Elena's airborne observations were providing ground truth for intelligence, assessments that had been based primarily on electronic intercepts and satellite imagery of limited resolution. Intelligence analysts monitoring the engagement recognized that Elena's tactical reporting was revealing previously unknown aspects of Taliban operational methods in the Korangal Valley. Her ability to identify camouflaged positions and movement routes from a single-seat aircraft while conducting active combat operations represented a combination of analytical skill and situational awareness that exceeded the capabilities demonstrated by most reconnaissance specialists operating under much more favorable conditions. Elena's next series of attack runs showcased tactical innovation that transformed her weapons limitations into advantages that confused and demoralized enemy forces. Throughout the valley, instead of attempting to destroy hardened positions with training ammunition, she developed harassment tactics that forced enemy fighters to abandon advantageous positions and move toward less favorable terrain where they became vulnerable to different types of attack. Her approach to the primary machine gun nest that had been controlling the convoy's northern escape route demonstrated creative thinking that challenged conventional assumptions about close air support tactics. Rather than attacking the position directly, Elena conducted a series of precision strikes against the surrounding area that created rock slides and debris falls, effectively entombing the enemy fighters without requiring direct hits on their hardened position. Hillside 6, northern machine gun position, is neutralized through terrain modification. Enemy fighters in that location are cut off from their escape routes and supply lines. They're no longer a tactical factor in your immediate situation. Captain Morrison's amazement at Elena's innovative solution was evident in his response, which carried the tone of someone witnessing tactics that had never been covered in any military training program. Bulldog 9, that's the most creative problem solving I've seen in 15 years of infantry operations. How did you know that approach would work? Elena's explanation revealed a depth of knowledge about geology, ballistics, and tactical engineering that went far beyond standard pilot training. Hillside 6, I studied the rock formations during my initial reconnaissance. The limestone in this area has natural fracture lines that become unstable when subjected to precision impacts at specific points. Training rounds actually work better than explosive ordnance for this application because they create focused stress without the blast effects that might disperse the energy. The technical explanation drew immediate attention from engineering specialists monitoring the engagement from various command centers throughout the theater of operations. Elena's approach represented practical application of advanced technical knowledge to solve immediate tactical problems, demonstrating intellectual capabilities that contradicted every assumption about her supposed limitations as a pilot and military officer. Her systematic approach to neutralizing enemy positions throughout the valley revealed understanding of complex tactical relationships that allowed her to prioritize targets based on their role in the enemy's overall operational plan rather than simply their immediate threat to friendly forces. This strategic perspective enabled her to achieve cascading tactical effects that disrupted the entire enemy force rather than simply suppressing individual firing positions. The Taliban commanders coordinating the ambush found their carefully planned operation collapsing as Elena's attacks eliminated key positions in sequence that destroyed their ability to maintain coordinated fire against the convoy. Radio intercepts revealed growing frustration and confusion among enemy fighters who had expected to overwhelm the small convoy before effective air support could arrive. Elena's tactical radio communications with Captain Morrison evolved into a sophisticated coordination process that enabled increasingly complex operations, despite the absence of traditional close air support infrastructure. Her ability to understand ground tactical requirements and translate them into appropriate aerial attacks created synergy between air and ground forces that maximized their combined effectiveness. Bulldog 9, we need to establish a secure landing zone for medical evacuation, but the area is still under observation from multiple enemy positions. Can you create a diversion that draws their attention away from the designated site? Elena's response demonstrated tactical creativity that incorporated deception and misdirection as force multipliers that enhanced the effectiveness of her limited ammunition. Hillside 6, I can create the appearance of a major attack developing from the western approach while you establish your landing zone to the east. Give me 5 minutes to set up the deception, then move your wounded to the evacuation point. The deception operation showcased Elena's understanding of psychological warfare, principles that exploited enemy expectations and tactical doctrine to achieve results far beyond what her actual capabilities should have enabled. Her attack pattern created the illusion of multiple aircraft approaching from different directions, forcing enemy observers to divide their attention and abandon their surveillance of the medical evacuation site. Captain Morrison coordinated the medical evacuation with growing confidence in Elena's ability to provide effective tactical support for complex operations under challenging conditions. Bulldog 9, a medical bird, is inbound in 3 minutes. Can you maintain the deception until they're clear of the area? Elena's affirmative response came with additional tactical intelligence that demonstrated her ability to monitor multiple aspects of the developing situation simultaneously. Hillside 6, affirmative on deception maintenance. Be advised, I'm observing enemy reinforcements approaching from the south along the concealed trail I identified earlier. Estimate 20 to 30 additional fighters reaching your area in approximately 15 minutes. The intelligence warning provided Captain Morrison with critical information for planning his unit's tactical response to the developing threat. Elena's ability to provide advance warning of enemy reinforcements while conducting active combat operations represented multitasking capabilities that challenged assumptions about the cognitive limits of single-pilot operations in high-stress environments. Her attack patterns evolved throughout the engagement to incorporate lessons learned from enemy reactions to her previous strikes, rather than repeating successful tactics that enemy forces might adapt to counter. Elena continuously modified her approach to maintain tactical unpredictability that prevented effective enemy countermeasures. The medical evacuation proceeded successfully under Elena's protective cover, with the helicopter crew reporting minimal enemy fire during their approach and departure from the designated landing zone. Elena's tactical deception had effectively neutralized enemy observation capabilities during the critical period when the medical aircraft was most vulnerable to ground fire. Bulldog 9, medical evacuation complete. Outstanding tactical support. Our wounded personnel are now receiving proper medical attention thanks to your innovative approach. Elena's acknowledgement carried professional satisfaction, tempered by awareness that the tactical situation continued to evolve as enemy reinforcements approached the engagement area. Hillside 6, glad to help. Now let's address those reinforcements before they complicate your tactical situation further. Her approach to the advancing enemy reinforcements demonstrated tactical thinking that incorporated both immediate engagement requirements and longer-term strategic considerations. Rather than attacking the reinforcements directly, Elena identified choke points along their approach route where small-scale attacks could achieve disproportionate tactical effects. The reinforcement column was moving along a narrow trail that wound through a series of ravines and defiles, terrain features that channeled their movement into predictable patterns while limiting their ability to disperse when attacked. Elena's analysis of the terrain revealed several locations where precision strikes could block the trail system and force the reinforcements to abandon their vehicles and heavy equipment. Hillside 6, I can interdict the reinforcement column at 3 separate choke points along their approach route. This won't destroy them, but it will force them to continue on foot and abandon their heavy weapons and supplies. Captain Morrison's response reflected tactical appreciation for Elena's strategic approach to the developing threat. Bulldog 9, that sounds like an excellent plan. Delaying them and forcing them to approach on foot would give us significant tactical advantages. Elena's interdiction attacks against the trail system demonstrated precision and tactical creativity that transformed geographic features into tactical obstacles through careful application of limited firepower. Her training rounds, precisely placed at critical points along the narrow trail, created rockslides and debris obstacles that effectively blocked vehicle movement while conserving her remaining ammunition for more critical targets. The success of the interdiction operations prompted monitoring personnel throughout the theater to recognize that Elena's performance represented more than simply competent flying under difficult conditions. Her tactical innovations and creative problem-solving were producing results that exceeded what conventional close air support doctrine considered possible with a single aircraft operating independently. Intelligence reports filtering back to higher headquarters described Elena's engagement as a case study in tactical innovation that could influence future doctrine development for close air support operations in challenging terrain. Her ability to achieve strategic effects through tactical creativity was being recognized as a potential model for similar operations throughout the theater. Elena's fuel state required careful management as the engagement extended beyond normal mission duration, but her efficient flying techniques and tactical planning allowed her to maintain effective combat operations while conserving fuel for potential emergency situations. Her small size reduced oxygen consumption and heat generation, providing endurance advantages that became increasingly important during extended combat operations. The combination of Elena's tactical success and professional competence had effectively silenced the earlier criticism from Captain Sullivan and Lieutenant Kozłowski, whose predictions of disaster and incompetence seemed increasingly disconnected from operational reality. Their radio silence reflected growing recognition that their assessment of Elena's capabilities had been fundamentally flawed. Major Davis coordinated with base operations to ensure that Elena would have access to aerial refueling if the tactical situation required extended operations beyond her aircraft's normal endurance limits. The unprecedented nature of her single-pilot success against a complex enemy force had elevated the engagement to priority status throughout the command structure. Elena's radio discipline and tactical communication skills enabled effective coordination, with multiple agencies and headquarters monitoring the engagement, while she simultaneously maintained tactical awareness of the developing ground situation and managed her aircraft systems under combat conditions. Her multitasking capabilities were producing results that challenged conventional assumptions about single-pilot operations in complex tactical environments. The engagement had evolved from a desperate rescue mission into a demonstration of tactical excellence that was being observed by senior military personnel throughout the operational theater. Elena's performance was recognized as potentially transformative for understanding the relationship between pilot skill, tactical innovation, and combat effectiveness in challenging operational environments. At 15:47 hours, the tactical situation in the Koringal Valley reached a critical inflection point as intercepted enemy communications revealed the Taliban's desperation move. Rather than accepting tactical defeat and withdrawing their forces, enemy commanders had made the catastrophic decision to commit their strategic reserve, a company-sized force of foreign fighters, equipped with advanced anti-aircraft weapons, that had been held in reserve for attacks against high-value coalition targets. Elena's fuel gauge showed critically low levels as she monitored the radio intercepts being relayed from intelligence platforms throughout the region. The decision facing her transcended simple tactical considerations to encompass questions of personal survival, mission priorities, and the lives of soldiers who had come to depend on her continued presence over the battlefield. Standard operating procedures demanded immediate return to base for refueling, but departing now would abandon Captain Morrison's convoy during the most dangerous phase of the engagement. Bulldog 9, this is Overlord. The voice belonged to Colonel Rebecca Martinez, commander of all close air support operations in eastern Afghanistan, speaking directly from the Joint Operations Center. We're tracking a significant enemy force moving toward your area with advanced surface-to-air capabilities. Recommend immediate withdrawal to Bagram for refuel and rearm with live ordnance. Elena's response carried the calm professionalism that had characterized her throughout the engagement, though her words contained implications that reached far beyond immediate tactical considerations. Overlord Bulldog 9 understands the threat assessment. However, Hillside 6 is still engaged with hostile forces and requires continued air support. Request permission to remain on station until relieved. The radio exchange was monitored by personnel throughout the military command structure, from squadron level to Pentagon officials who had been following Elena's unprecedented single-pilot engagement against overwhelming odds. Her willingness to accept personal risk rather than abandon ground forces facing annihilation represented the fundamental values that defined military service at its highest level. Colonel Martinez's response reflected the impossible position facing senior commanders when tactical necessities conflicted with force protection requirements. Bulldog 9, intelligence indicates incoming threats include shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles and radar-guided systems. Your aircraft lacks the defensive countermeasures necessary for survival in that environment. Elena's acknowledgement contained subtle references to capabilities that had never appeared in any official documentation of her training or experience. Overlord, understood. However, I've operated in similar threat environments before. Request clearance to engage using non-standard tactical approaches that may provide survivability advantages. The cryptic reference to previous operations in comparable environments drew immediate attention from intelligence personnel who began emergency reviews of Elena's classified service record. What they discovered challenged fundamental assumptions about her background and the scope of her operational experience during supposedly routine assignments throughout her military career. Major General Patricia Collins, commander of all Air Force operations in Afghanistan, personally assumed control of the tactical frequency as Elena's engagement achieved strategic significance that demanded flag-level oversight. Bulldog 9, this is Warhammer 6. I need confirmation of your actual operational experience before authorizing continuation of this mission. Elena's response revealed information that had been carefully concealed throughout her time with the 354th Fighter Squadron, hidden behind routine personnel assignments and training deployments that disguised her true operational history. Warhammer 6. I have extensive experience with advanced threat environments during classified operations that I am not authorized to discuss over unsecure channels. The revelation prompted immediate secure communications between General Collins and personnel from Air Force Special Operations Command, who maintained comprehensive records of classified pilot assignments throughout the operational theater. What emerged from those secure databases fundamentally altered understanding of Elena's qualifications and the basis for her assignment to what had appeared to be a routine fighter squadron. Elena Rodriguez had not simply been an unusually skilled pilot assigned to conventional operations. She had been a carefully placed special operations asset whose public profile as a struggling female pilot facing discrimination provided perfect cover for her actual role conducting classified missions throughout the region. Her apparent isolation within the squadron and the harassment she endured were both genuine experiences and useful cover for her true operational status. The advanced anti-aircraft threat approaching Elena's position included systems that had been responsible for numerous coalition aircraft losses throughout Afghanistan and Iraq. A-18 shoulder-fired missiles with sophisticated infrared seekers, radar-guided ZSU-234 anti-aircraft guns, and Chinese-manufactured FN-6 missiles represented technology specifically designed to counter American close air support tactics and aircraft survivability features. Elena's tactical response to the developing threat demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything anticipated from conventional A-10 operations or standard pilot training programs. Rather than attempting to avoid the enemy air defense systems, she developed an approach that would use the mountainous terrain and her aircraft's unique characteristics to neutralize the threat through direct engagement. Hillside 6, Bulldog 9. Heavy enemy air defense systems are approaching your location from multiple directions. I'm going to eliminate those systems before they can establish effective firing positions, but this will require close coordination and precise timing. Captain Morrison's response reflected complete confidence in Elena's capabilities, despite the apparently suicidal nature of her proposed mission. Bulldog 9 will provide whatever support you need. What do you require from ground forces? Elena's explanation revealed tactical planning that incorporated advanced knowledge of enemy weapon systems, terrain exploitation, and aircraft performance, characteristics that went far beyond standard military training. Hillside 6. I need you to coordinate simultaneous diversionary fires toward the eastern ridge while I approach the air defense systems from an unexpected direction. The timing must be precise to achieve tactical surprise. Her approach involved flying her A-10 at extremely low altitude through a narrow canyon system that would mask her radar signature while positioning her for attacks against the enemy air defense systems before they could establish effective firing positions. The flight path required precision flying that pushed both aircraft and pilot to their absolute limits while operating in an environment where any mistake would result in immediate destruction. The first enemy air defense position was a SA-18 missile team that had established a firing position on a prominent ridgeline with excellent visibility throughout the valley system. Elena's approach utilized terrain masking and precise timing to achieve complete tactical surprise, emerging from behind a rock formation at point-blank range. Before the enemy operators could acquire and engage her aircraft, her attack run against. The missile position demonstrated flying skills that impressed even the most experienced personnel monitoring the engagement from various command centers. Elena's A-10 maneuvered through the confined space between ridgelines with precision that seemed to defy the aircraft's reputation as a stable but unagile platform designed for conventional close air support rather than air-to-air combat maneuvering. Training rounds she employed against the SA-18 position achieved devastating effectiveness through precise placement that disabled the missile launcher and eliminated the entire enemy crew. Elena's understanding of the weapon system's vulnerabilities allowed her to achieve complete destruction using ammunition that should have provided only minimal damage against hardened targets. Hillside 6, first air defense position eliminated. Moving to engage a radar-guided system approximately 2 kilometers south of your location. Continue diversionary fires to mask my approach. Elena's second attack target presented even greater challenges as the ZSU-234 anti-aircraft gun featured radar guidance systems that could track and engage her aircraft automatically once she came within range. Her tactical solution involved exploiting the radar system's limitations and the weapon's positioning to achieve another successful engagement. Against overwhelming odds, the attack run required Elena to approach the target from directly overhead, diving vertically through the weapon's minimum engagement angle while delivering precision fires that disabled its radar tracking system before the automated guns could acquire and engage her aircraft. The maneuver pushed her A-10 beyond its normal flight envelope, while requiring split-second timing that allowed no margin for error. Captain Morrison and his soldiers observed Elena's attacks against the enemy air defense systems with amazement that bordered on disbelief. Her flying demonstrated capabilities that seemed to transcend normal human limitations, while her tactical innovations continued to produce results that exceeded what conventional military doctrine considered possible. The third and most dangerous enemy air defense system was a FN-6 missile launcher operated by foreign fighters with extensive training and experience using the weapon against American aircraft. Elena's approach to this target required her to exploit knowledge of the missile's guidance system and performance, characteristics that suggested classified intelligence access far beyond what was available to conventional pilots. Her attack pattern involved a complex series of defensive maneuvers designed to defeat the missile's infrared tracking system while positioning her aircraft for effective engagement of the launcher position. Elena's execution of the defensive sequence demonstrated flying skills and tactical knowledge that confirmed her background in classified operations requiring specialized training and security clearances. The successful elimination of all 3 enemy air defense systems within a span of 12 minutes represented tactical achievement that would be studied by military analysts for years to come. Elena's performance had neutralized a threat that conventional doctrine considered insurmountable for a single aircraft operating without electronic warfare support or advanced defensive countermeasures. Colonel Martinez's voice returned to the tactical frequency with formal recognition of Elena's extraordinary achievement. Bulldog 9, this is Overlord. Outstanding tactical performance. You have eliminated a strategic threat that would have compromised coalition air operations throughout the region. Elena's response maintained the professional modesty that had characterized her throughout the engagement, though her words carried implications about the broader significance of her mission. Overlord, threat neutralization complete. However, my fuel state requires immediate return to base unless aerial refueling can be provided. The request for aerial refueling triggered immediate coordination between multiple agencies as senior commanders recognized the strategic value of maintaining Elena's presence over the battlefield. Her tactical innovations and demonstrated capabilities had transformed what began as a convoy rescue mission into a comprehensive defeat of enemy operations throughout the Korangal Valley. Major Davis coordinated the emergency refueling mission from Bagram Operations Center while Elena maintained tactical overwatch of Captain Morrison's convoy. The aerial refueling would allow her to continue operations that had effectively eliminated organized Taliban resistance throughout the region while providing time for additional coalition forces to arrive and secure the area. Elena's revelation as a classified special operations pilot explained many aspects of her background that had seemed inconsistent with her public profile within the squadron. Her tolerance for harassment and discrimination had been genuine, but it had also provided perfect cover for her true operational role, requiring deep concealment of her actual capabilities and mission assignments. The fuel transfer from the KC-135 tanker aircraft occurred under combat conditions as Alina maintained vigilance against possible enemy attempts to exploit her temporary vulnerability during the refueling process. Her ability to conduct precision formation flying while monitoring the tactical situation below demonstrated multitasking capabilities that exceeded normal pilot training standards. Captain Sullivan and Lieutenant Kozłowski's radio silence throughout Alina's combat operations reflected their growing recognition that their assessment of her capabilities had been fundamentally wrong. Their earlier harassment and discrimination had been directed against someone whose actual qualifications and operational experience far exceeded their own, though security classifications had prevented her from defending herself or revealing her true background. Alina's tactical radio communications during the refueling process revealed additional information about classified operations that had been conducted throughout the region using cover identities and false profiles designed to conceal the true scope of American Special Operations capabilities. Her public struggle as an apparently unsuccessful female pilot had provided perfect concealment for activities that would have drawn attention if conducted by obviously elite personnel. The successful completion of aerial refueling allowed Alina to continue operations that would achieve complete tactical dominance throughout the Korangal Valley, transforming a Taliban stronghold into a demonstration of American tactical superiority that would influence enemy planning and operations throughout eastern Afghanistan. Her individual performance had achieved strategic effects that typically required major military operations involving hundreds of personnel and extensive resources. General Collins's final transmission to Alina carried recognition that transcended immediate tactical considerations to acknowledge the broader implications of her extraordinary performance. Bulldog 9. This is Warhammer 6. Your mission today will be remembered as one of the finest examples of individual tactical excellence in the history of close air support operations. Alina's acknowledgement maintained the professional humility that had characterized her throughout the engagement, though her words suggested awareness of the broader significance of what had been achieved. Warhammer 6, thank you. However, this mission's success belongs to all personnel who supported the operation, particularly the ground forces who maintained tactical discipline under extremely difficult conditions. The engagement had revealed Elena Rodriguez not as an underappreciated pilot struggling against discrimination, but as one of the Air Force's most elite special operations assets, whose cover identity had provided perfect concealment for capabilities that would reshape understanding of individual tactical potential in modern combat operations. The aftermath of Elena's extraordinary mission began unfolding before she had even landed back at Bagram Air Base. Word of her single-handed neutralization of an entire Taliban operational network had spread through military communication channels across multiple continents, reaching senior Pentagon officials, NATO command structures, and intelligence agencies, whose personnel had been monitoring the engagement in real time. What had begun as a routine convoy rescue had evolved into a demonstration of individual tactical excellence that would influence military doctrine and operational planning for years to come. As Elena's A-10 touched down on Bagram's main runway at 18:23 hours, the aircraft was immediately surrounded by security personnel from multiple agencies, whose presence indicated the sensitive nature of what had just occurred. Staff Sergeant Chun, her dedicated crew chief, waited beside the aircraft with an expression that mixed professional pride with obvious amazement at the condition of the aircraft that had just completed one of the most demanding single-pilot combat missions in Air Force history. The post-flight inspection revealed evidence of Elena's extraordinary day that would become legendary among maintenance personnel throughout the theater of operations. Her aircraft showed minimal battle damage despite operating for hours in one of the most dangerous environments in Afghanistan, while the precision wear patterns on various systems indicated flying that had pushed both pilot and machine to their absolute performance limits without exceeding safe operational parameters. General Patricia Collins arrived at the flight line personally to debrief Elena, accompanied by a team of intelligence analysts, operational specialists, and senior officers whose combined expertise would be required to fully understand the tactical innovations and strategic implications of what had been accomplished. The debriefing session would last for hours and produce classified reports that would influence Air Force training programs, tactical doctrine, and personnel selection criteria for years to come. Elena's demeanor during the initial debriefing maintained the professional composure that had characterized her throughout the mission, though careful observers noted subtle signs of the physical and emotional exhaustion that inevitably followed sustained high-stress combat operations. Her responses to questions revealed not only exceptional tactical competence, but also the analytical rigor necessary to transform combat experience into institutional learning that could benefit future operations. The revelation of Elena's classified background triggered immediate reviews of personnel policies and security procedures that had allowed such an extraordinary asset to operate under cover within a conventional fighter squadron. Her tolerance of harassment and discrimination had provided perfect operational security, but it had also exposed systemic problems within military culture that required comprehensive institutional responses. Captain Morrison and his convoy reached Forward Operating Base Restrepo safely that evening, carrying with them medical supplies that would save lives throughout the region and stories of air support that seemed to transcend normal human capabilities. Morrison's after-action report would become required reading at military academies and staff colleges, studied for its insights into the relationship between individual excellence and tactical success under impossible conditions. The impact on the 354th Fighter Squadron was immediate and profound as personnel struggled to reconcile Elena's revealed capabilities with their previous assumptions about her competence and suitability for combat operations. Captain Sullivan and Lieutenant Kozłowski faced formal investigations into their harassment campaign, while their professional reputations suffered damage that would affect their careers permanently. Major Davis found herself coordinating damage control efforts as news of the squadron's treatment of their most capable pilot reached senior leadership levels throughout the Air Force. The incident prompted comprehensive reviews of unit climate, leadership effectiveness, and the hidden costs of allowing discrimination and harassment to persist within combat organizations whose effectiveness depended on maximizing every individual's potential contributions. Elena's true identity as a special operations asset required careful management to maintain operational security while acknowledging her extraordinary achievement. The cover story developed for public consumption described her as an exceptionally talented pilot whose abilities had been under-recognized due to institutional biases, a narrative that contained enough truth to be credible while concealing the classified aspects of her background and mission. The Pentagon's response to Elena's mission transcended individual recognition to encompass broader questions about talent identification, personnel utilization, and the relationship between apparent limitations and actual capabilities. Her demonstration that a pilot dismissed by her own squadron could achieve strategic effects typically requiring major military operations challenged fundamental assumptions about force structure and individual potential. Air Force Chief of Staff General Michael Thompson personally reviewed Elena's case as part of a comprehensive assessment of how the service identified, developed, and utilized exceptional talent. Her experience highlighted systemic problems in evaluation criteria that emphasized conformity and traditional markers of success while potentially overlooking individuals whose capabilities didn't fit conventional patterns. The tactical innovations Elena had demonstrated during her mission became the subject of intensive study by operational analysts, whose task was to determine which techniques could be incorporated into standard training programs and which represented unique applications of individual talent that couldn't be easily replicated. Her creative use of terrain, innovative weapons employment, and tactical deception became case studies for advanced pilot training programs. Elena's psychological resilience in the face of sustained harassment while maintaining cover for classified operations became a topic of study for military psychologists, investigating the hidden costs of discrimination and the extraordinary strength required to endure systematic prejudice while performing at the highest levels of professional competence. The Taliban's operational capabilities in the Korengal Valley were permanently degraded by Elena's mission, with intelligence assessments indicating that the network she had destroyed would require months or years to reconstitute. Her individual actions had achieved strategic effects that influenced enemy planning throughout eastern Afghanistan, demonstrating the potential for exceptional individual performance to produce results far beyond immediate tactical considerations. Captain Morrison's public statements about Elena's support carefully avoided classified details, while making clear that her intervention had saved not only his convoy but also the lives of wounded personnel at Forward Operating Base Restrepo who received critical medical supplies. His descriptions of her tactical competence and innovative problem-solving helped reshape perceptions about female pilots' capabilities in combat roles. The broader implications of Elena's mission extended to international military cooperation, as Allied forces throughout Afghanistan requested information about American tactics and training methods that could produce such extraordinary individual performance. Her achievement became a source of national pride and international respect that enhanced American military prestige throughout the region. Elena's subsequent assignments reflected recognition of her exceptional capabilities while maintaining necessary operational security around her classified background. Her transition to openly acknowledged special operations roles allowed her to mentor other pilots while developing training programs that incorporated lessons learned from her unique operational experience. The Veterans Outreach Program that had originally inspired Elena's military service received unprecedented support as her story, carefully edited to protect classified information, became widely known throughout military and veteran communities. Her demonstration that individual excellence could overcome institutional prejudice inspired countless other military personnel facing similar challenges in their own careers. Staff Sergeant Chun's maintenance logs from Elena's historic mission became treasured documents that were studied by aircraft mechanics throughout the Air Force who wanted to understand how proper maintenance and pilot skill could combine to achieve seemingly impossible results. His pride in supporting Elena's extraordinary achievement became legendary among maintenance personnel who recognized their critical role in enabling combat success. The 354th Fighter Squadron underwent comprehensive leadership changes and cultural transformation as Air Force senior leadership addressed the systemic problems that had allowed such valuable talent to be wasted through harassment and discrimination. The incident became a case study in leadership failure and the hidden costs of toxic unit climate on operational effectiveness. Elena's influence on Air Force culture extended far beyond her individual squadron as her story became part of training programs designed to help personnel recognize and develop exceptional talent, regardless of whether it fit traditional expectations. Her experience demonstrated that the most valuable capabilities might be found in individuals who appeared to struggle within conventional evaluation systems. The tactical radio recordings from Elena's mission became classified training materials, used at the highest levels of military education to teach advanced decision-making, tactical innovation, and the art of achieving maximum results with limited resources. Her communications with Captain Morrison became models for effective air-ground coordination under extreme conditions. Years later, Elena's mission would be remembered as a pivotal moment that influenced fundamental changes in military personnel. Policies, training methods, and cultural attitudes toward diversity and inclusion. Her demonstration that extraordinary talent could emerge from unexpected sources challenged institutional assumptions and created opportunities for countless other military personnel who might otherwise have been overlooked or dismissed. The Congressional Medal of Honor citation that Elena eventually received carefully balanced recognition of her extraordinary achievement with the requirements of operational security, describing actions that saved lives and achieved strategic objectives while protecting classified details that remained sensitive years after the mission. Her medal joined a select group, awarded for individual actions that influenced the broader course of military operations. Elena's post-military career focused on developing training programs and leadership development initiatives that helped organizations identify and nurture exceptional talent while creating environments where all personnel could achieve their maximum potential. Her insights into overcoming institutional prejudice and achieving excellence, despite systematic obstacles, became influential in both military and civilian contexts. The legacy of Elena's mission in the Korengal Valley continued to influence military operations and personnel policies decades after the engagement, serving as a permanent reminder that exceptional achievement often comes from unexpected sources, and that the most dangerous enemy any organization faces may be its own prejudices and limitations in recognizing human potential. Her story became a symbol of the hidden strength that exists within individuals who refuse to be defined by others' limitations and expectations, demonstrating that true excellence requires not only exceptional skill, but also the courage to persist in the face of systematic discrimination and doubt. Elena Rodriguez had proven that the greatest victories are often achieved by those whom others underestimate, and that the most powerful weapon in any military arsenal remains the human spirit that refuses to surrender in the face of impossible odds. The small-framed pilot who had been mocked for her appearance and dismissed for her supposed limitations had saved lives, influenced military doctrine, and changed institutional culture through her refusal to accept others' definitions of what she could achieve. Her legacy would inspire generations of military personnel to look beyond surface appearances and traditional expectations to find the extraordinary potential that exists within every individual, willing to commit themselves to excellence and service above self. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.